On this edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast, we into all the big news out of WWE this week, including the 10 release superstars. Also, we welcome a very special guest to help us dive into the world of AEW. It's all coming up next on this weekly Wednesday wrap-up edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. The bomb drops now. Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast, the show that is for the fans, by the fans. Thanks so much for checking us out, whether you're watching us on YouTube or whether you're listening on a traditional podcast format. We appreciate you checking out the show. I'm your host, Chris Belcher. You can follow me. I am at Chris Belcher24 on all the social media platforms. Be sure to follow the podcast at PBW Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and all of those things. Make sure that you buy a t-shirt from us, ProWrestlingTees.com/PBW Podcast. Tune into our show every Monday and Wednesday. And if you forget all of those things, check out our fancy ticker there at the bottom. We like to remind you, keep you up to date on everything that's going on. Now, at the beginning of this show, I teased a very special guest. And with me from last week, you may remember him from the WrestleMania recaps. It's the host of the Shandy Show. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy York is back with us. Andy, what's going on, man?
Oh, not much, man. I'm happy to be back to talk about some wrestling. I'm looking forward to it, man.
Absolutely. We love having you on here, especially when we talk about AEW, because you are our resident AEW expert. I mean, you are one of the guys that I turn to.
Yeah.
So we want to dive more into AEW this time around. So had to bring you on to talk about that. But before we do, you are the host of the Shandy Show. You have that coming up very soon. Tell everybody where they can find the show and what it's about.
Yeah, so you can obviously tell by my wonderful background behind me everywhere that I am really into Marvel and DC and Star Wars and comic book things like that. So on our show, we kind of cover all things Marvel, DC, Star Wars. In fact, today, actually, they just dropped a trailer for the Shang-Chi movie that's coming out in September. So we're going to be talking about all that in the next few weeks. I'm actually getting married in 2 weeks, so I'm not starting until after I get back from that because planning a wedding and trying to do this is not very easy to do. And so I'm starting back kind of after we get back from our honeymoon and everything. So I'm looking forward to diving back in and getting my feet wet again in the YouTube and podcasting and all of that fun stuff. And we're going to dive into a little bit of wrestling here and there as well. So I'm looking forward to all that.
Well, when you cover that wrestling, you got my number.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So we are here. We are, full disclosure, recording this on a Monday night. Typically, we record our podcast on Tuesday nights. So we are in the middle of Monday Night Raw. So we will be maybe updating you a little bit as we get through that. But the first thing we want to talk about is the big news out of WWE this week. They released 10 superstars this past Thursday. And the headliners of that list, the big ones, maybe that people really didn't expect, the Iconics, Billy Kay and Peyton Royce, and the biggest one of all, man, Samoa Joe. You and I were texting whenever this news broke. What were your initial thoughts on the releases? Of course, there were more: Chelsea Green, Kalisto, Bo Dallas. There's a few more there, but just, man, Samoa Joe is the one that really shook everybody up because he was featured prominently as a commentator.
Yeah, some of these make sense to me because they haven't been doing anything for a while.
Sure.
And, I understand we're still going through a pandemic and money is tight, but the biggest thing to me is like Samoa Joe might go down as one of the biggest wasted opportunities in WWE. Like they never, the only time they really got him right was in the build up to SummerSlam with the Fatal 4-Way, and then the one-on-one match with him and Brock, which was a little underwhelming, but I mean, it was still handled pretty well. But you see the guy cut promos. All over Twitter, I've seen posted videos of him cutting massive promos with the day he got released, but he cut like some of his best promos that he did in WWE. It's a shame that he's gone now. I mean, it's kind of a bittersweet moment for me because like I would love to see him, and he should have been WWE or Universal Champion at some point.
Sure.
That I figured that was just kind of a given, but now he's kind of coming back on the independent scene. I would honestly, I know everybody's clamoring for him to go to AEW. I would love for him to go to New Japan and put on some like hard hitting, stiff matches there for a little while. I think AEW is obviously in his future at some point because why not? But I would love to see him kind of take a little detour into New Japan and a few other places before going there. But to me, it's going to go down as one of the biggest missed opportunities by WWE with a talented superstar.
So follow up on that. Who I'm gonna put you on the spot. Who is the bigger missed opportunity between Samoa Joe and Shinsuke Nakamura?
Honestly, I would say Samoa Joe, just because of the fact that Shinsuke is still in the company right now, and he could kind of pick himself back up. I think he's kind of on a slow rise now, to the point where I could see him and Roman going at it for the Universal Championship sometime soon. But as of right now, I would say Samoa Joe because he's now outside of the company and, kind of going on to do bigger and probably better things.
And Shinsuke won a Rumble. Shinsuke wrestled for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Joe only had one WrestleMania match. And it was like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But that being said, Joe had a great feud with AJ Styles. That was probably the best thing that he did in the company. You mentioned the Brock thing. That was really good too. But everybody was really latching on to him as a commentator. So I was really surprised that he got released because he was that good. I immediately thought, because we had the announce team shakeup, which we're going to get to in a second, when Corey Graves moved to Raw, they didn't announce SmackDown right away. So I immediately thought, oh, well, Joe's going to be on SmackDown with Michael Cole. That'll be really good. And then now he's gone.
Yeah.
So do you think that that it was announced that he was released, but do you think it may have been more of a mutual parting? Maybe that WWE didn't want to put him back in the ring and Joe wanted to get back in the ring?
Probably a little bit. I honestly think it was one of those, we don't have anything for you now. And I think that it was kind of one of those of, Joe was probably thinking, well, if you have nothing for me, I could find something better on the independent scene. And so I think it was more of those.
Maybe he requested his release without it being or whatever.
Probably. Yeah.
All right, man. So speaking of the new announce teams, let's dive into that. I think is it Adnan, I think. Adnan. Okay. Adnan Virk from MLB Network and some ESPN stuff. He is now the new play-by-play guy on Monday Night Raw, alongside of Corey Graves and Byron Saxton, which is really good to put those guys with him because I'm not going to say anything too negative against him. He does need some help. He's a new guy. I don't know how much you were watching then. Do you remember when they brought in Mike Adamle and he was the play-by-play guy on Monday Night Raw? I think it was like late 2000s, early 2010, something like that.
Yeah, very, very loosely I remember because that's kind of the time I started kind of a minute watching a little bit was that.
Yep. So I feel like I compare these very, very closely in that I feel like that same thing. But I don't know. It's going to take a while to get used to him, but he's got some good support with Corey Graves and Byron Saxton. First two shows for Adnan. What are your thoughts on him?
I mean, it is what it is. He's obviously not going to be perfect right away. He's got to figure out his way and his groove, and I'm sure it's not easy with Vince probably in his ear or whoever's in charge or whoever is talking to him specifically. It's probably not easy with him in his ear the entire time. But I've listened to him call baseball games for years, and so he does well there. I think it's difficult because there he was kind of on his feet, where here he probably has to follow and hit certain beats that are probably difficult for him to remember or try to do that very well. And he's not just kind of going with the wind, whatever happens type of situation. But I do agree having more Corey Graves than Byron Saxton, because I've never been a big Byron Saxton fan, but I think Corey Graves and Byron to an extent will help kind of guide him in the right direction of where they're going.
Yep. I totally agree. But somebody that doesn't need any guidance is Mr. Pat McAfee, the new analyst on Friday Night SmackDown. Man, I love his podcast. I'm a huge fan of anything that Pat McAfee does. And now to put him on SmackDown with Michael Cole, man, I think he hit out of the park on Friday.
Oh, absolutely. He from his run on NXT, he was fantastic. He's just so there's something about him. He gets it. And
Yep.
it's so weird that like he was obviously when he played football, he was a very cocky punter. And like that's like the weirdest position to be cocky at, but it fits for him. And I think
Right.
I think that translates perfectly over into the world of wrestling. And so
Yep.
I think it was very smart to put him on commentary. And like I saw a video of him, like I don't even think he prepared. I just think he sat down and like went for it. And I think you could tell. And I think that's what made it so much fun was that he was very genuine about everything. And
Yeah.
I think between him and Michael Cole, who are two completely different people,
Right.
I think it's going to work pretty well.
I do too. I really like it because I feel like it has almost the same kind of dynamic as Cole and Graves,
Yeah.
which I thought was a great pairing. A lot of people don't like Michael Cole. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
Just saying. So I think McAfee is a home run on SmackDown, especially it's on Fox. So
Yeah.
he has that name that he can help bring in. So people in the sports world and the Fox sports world are used to hearing his voice.
Right.
So you hear him on a new show. Oh, what's this? Pat McAfee's on it. It must be good.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
And I wouldn't be totally shocked if he gets in the ring at some point and
he will.
mixes it up with somebody. I think that would be really great.
I think the perfect guy to put him in there with is Seth Rollins.
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking he would probably join with Seth and like be a part of the ministry or whatever that Seth's got going on, and then you could see a turn or something there. But I think that would be fun because I think McAfee's more fun as a heel than he's a face, and I think that makes it a lot more interesting. And right now, I think Seth Rollins is much better as a heel than a face. I think both of those would be fun to watch together.
Yep, I agree. I totally agree. All right, so we mentioned SmackDown. Looks like that you and I kind of called it on our WrestleMania post show. Cesaro seems to be the next challenger for Roman Reigns. I hope this is not just he had a good match at WrestleMania. Let's see what he does here. I hope it's, and then, go away with it. I hope it's something long term, that they can push him a little bit, or at least, give him the Intercontinental title. Let him feud with Apollo Crews if he's not going to be Universal Champion.
Yeah, I think it's too to me it's too soon. Which is what it is. But like you said, I would have loved for him to kind of feud with Apollo, help him hold the IC belt for a little while. He could drop it around Hell in a Cell and maybe even Survivor Series, and then I would love for him to like go on to win the Rumble and then win at WrestleMania or challenge at WrestleMania. So I think, but I mean, if it's going to be a great match between him and Roman, anyways, I think it's going to be so much fun to watch both of them. And it could be a triple threat between him, Seth, and Roman, which would be a lot of fun as well. So there's a lot of things that are up in the air with it right now. But if that's the way they go, I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch. And I think it'll be a good way for Cesaro to lose and still look really strong. And I think that's more important than anything right now is for Cesaro to continue to look strong after WrestleMania.
I mean, we said it on the WrestleMania post show, man, that the two best matches, night 1 and night 2, aside from Sasha and Bianca, was Cesaro and Seth, and then the triple threat match. So you have the winners of those two matches. What's a better way to make Cesaro look strong than to put him in that match, win or lose, like you just said? Yeah. Plus, Paul Heyman's a big Cesaro fan.
Yeah.
So having that together, I think it's going to work really well.
And Paul will be able to help Cesaro with his promos, which I think is going to be very nice because Cesaro struggles with his promos.
Yep.
Not full. Like I think he's pretty decent on the mic. He's not as bad as a lot of people say he is. But I think there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think Paul Heyman will help him kind of get the little things that make a promo important, that make a promo so important. I think Paul will help him kind of guide him in what he needs to be saying and how he needs to be saying it. And I think it'll be really intense. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch.
I also think too that Cesaro is one of those guys you have to just let go on the mic. Just let him do his thing. Because like you said, Paul Heyman can kind of guide him. And if they just let him kind of play off of that, then I think that that's way more success if they let him do that than to force it. Because I mean, Cesaro, he's not from here.
Right.
Sometimes he could probably be hard to understand if you try to make him memorize something and convey it in a certain way when that's not really him.
Yeah, I think, and like not to like jump on to like Monday Night Raw because as we're watching it live, but
sure,
like to start off with Raw, Drew McIntyre cut a promo, and you could tell that it was a very heavily scripted promo. And I think Drew's one of those guys that you can tell when his promo is scripted and when it's not scripted.
Sure.
Because like at WrestleMania, when he cut that promo backstage, it lit a fire into me. I was ready to go out and fight.
Sure.
But like some of like listening to like his promo on Raw tonight, it was very dry and kind of boring. And it's like if you would just kind of let these guys cut loose and be themselves and let them, give them a few things that they need to say, but let them get there on their own. I think it would be more organic, and I think it would help everybody out in the long run. So I hope that they let Cesaro, with the guidance of Paul Heyman, kind of do that as well.
Yep, absolutely, no doubt. So from SmackDown, you mentioned Monday Night Raw. So far tonight, maybe last week, give me some collective thoughts on maybe both those shows from the fallout of WrestleMania. What really stands out to you on both of those shows so far?
The Fiend situation is I listened to your advice, which I normally, I try to listen to, but it's a little difficult. But I was going to let the story play out. I was going to give them a chance to, set the stage, and they did nothing last week. They did absolutely nothing.
I'm really shocked that we just went immediately back to the Firefly Funhouse.
I think you could have gone back to the Firefly Funhouse, but I think you could have at least had them say something, like at least address the situation, or like at least have maybe if you're going to go with Alexa controlling Bray, maybe like have Bray Wyatt not be there, but Alexa be there with a Bray Wyatt doll or something like that. Like you could do something like that, but just Randy Orton was like, "Oh, I'm done with the Fiend. Let me just go over here. Now that I'm done with that, nothing has changed with my character." And the Bray Wyatt's like, "Oh, yay, I lost again, but let's kind of just go back to where we were." Right. And like there were reports that Vince and I think Bruce Pritchard kind of changed the match last minute to the original outcome was supposed to be the Fiend going over on Randy, and then they changed it to Randy going over the Fiend and whatever situation. And so the fact that we kind of found out that Bray didn't have as much control over the situation, which I don't think he needed full control, but he was doing a fantastic job with the character, and now you've kind of once again Goldberged him and like stopped his progress again. And it's one of those. It was very frustrating to kind of find all this out. And if the story was great, if the story progressed naturally and in a different but fun way or exciting way, then the loss wouldn't have mattered. But the WrestleMania loss for the Fiend is kind of starting to stick out even more, and not in a positive way.
See, I would have, if I'm telling that story, I'm like you, I would have at least kept Bray off TV for at least 1 week. The Raw after Mania, he did not need to be there.
No, he
did not.
So
I would have told the story like his next appearance should be the Fiend appearing in front of Alexa Bliss, maybe surprise her or something, and then we dive more into that.
Yeah.
That way, with them there, him as the Fiend instead of him coming back as Bray Wyatt.
Yeah.
Then maybe, however they interact, then maybe that sparks him to return as Bray Wyatt the following week, or what have you.
Yeah. To me, the most compelling story would be Alexa Bliss, not as Sister Abigail, but as Alexa Bliss controlling the Fiend. Like to me, that's different, and it's interesting. I think that kind of plays onto it. So I think, like you said, you could have had Bray Wyatt not on TV. You could have either done the doll, or you could have had like the Fiend there, but her like controlling him, or like talking down to him, or talking over him, like whatever the situation is. I think you could have that going on. I think that would work well, but they just did nothing with it.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. So before we move on though to AEW, we really hit some points on Raw and on SmackDown. Let's hit NXT for a minute, man. NXT had a big takeover. NXT really knocked it out of the park for those 2 nights. And last week, a huge NXT show. You've got Kushida winning the Cruiserweight Championship over Santos Escobar. You've got a reunion of Raquel Gonzalez, Rhea Ripley, and Bianca Belair, all sporting their new hardware, the new champions on all 3 brands. It was cool to see a reunion between them. And then, of course, Karrion Kross coming out as the new NXT champion. Taya Valkyrie debuting as Frankie Monet. Man, it was a loaded NXT last week. Just talk a little bit about what you think about, what direction some of those stories are heading, and give me your big thoughts there.
Yeah, so to me, the biggest surprise was Kushida beating Escobar for the Cruiserweight Championship.
Absolutely.
But I think that's going to serve a purpose of kind of giving Kushida his moment in the sun. But also, I think Escobar is going to move up to probably challenge for the North American Championship against Gargano. I think that would be a fun match to watch between those two guys.
That would be a blast.
Yeah. And so I think this is kind of a way to set up Escobar as a big time player in NXT. To me, I think Escobar is going to be what Andrade should have been in WWE, yes. And I hope so, because Andrade was a guy that started off in NXT. I actually remember going to an NXT house show here in Nashville before he even debuted. Andrade was in a opening match against, I think it was Elias. I think it was the night Elias got hurt. And I think they were going, like, those two were fighting. So, but he was kind of a nobody that nobody really got his character. And then Zelina came in and changed his character completely to one of the most dominant characters in NXT at the time.
Yep.
So I think Escobar could be on the path that Andrade was on. Hopefully it's a better outcome than he got. So like that one is very exciting to me. Roderick Strong quitting NXT, I think, is very interesting.
I didn't even mention that. Yeah. I love the way that they're running with that story. I cannot wait to see where it goes.
And like the way he did it, at first I was like, maybe this dude literally just quit. Like, maybe I could, if he walked away right now, that would, right. I could believe it right now. So like that whole Undisputed Era breaking up is kind of taking over NXT, which I really like, because they were basically the brand, like they were the forefront of NXT for so long. So that was very exciting to see that. And then the main event was Ember Moon and Shotzi Blackheart versus.
It was Ember, Shotzi, Bronson Reed, and Dexter Loomis against the Way.
The Way, yeah. Which Dexter Loomis, I actually saw him wrestle. I forget what his name was prior.
We saw him. He was at the NWA show.
Yeah.
He was Sammy something or other.
Yeah.
Because he won that first Fatal 4-Way match.
Yeah.
And faced Willie Mack for the national title or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So I've actually seen him wrestle twice. I saw him then, and then I saw him at a Ring of Honor show in Nashville, where I actually saw him, I think, go up against Damian Priest before he went to NXT.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And so, like, even then, I was like, I don't understand. Like, this dude is a creeper, and it's weird, and it doesn't really work. But now he's like, Dexter Loomis is so much fun to watch. Like, Dexter Loomis is he doesn't talk. He shouldn't talk at all. He shouldn't do anything except just be the creeper in the background that picks up women and walks away with them. Like that fits his character, and it shouldn't in today's world, but it does, and it's fine. And wow. I love it. I'm all for it.
I'm glad we're talking about make believe entertainment when you say pick up women and just carry them off, because
that's actually that's too real.
Oh my goodness. Oh man, lots of stuff on NXT. I am digging the stuff that they are putting out right now. I mean, NXT is by far my favorite show of the three right now. I'm not going to say it's not even close, because SmackDown's been really good, but NXT is really, they are killing it right now. They really are. If you are just now joining us, I am Chris Belcher. This is the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. Make sure you follow us all over social media at PBW Podcast. Make sure you check out our little ticker down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening on a traditional audio format, make sure you subscribe. That way the show automatically downloads when it comes to you every Monday and Wednesday. I am alongside the host of the Shandy Show, Mr. Andy York, who you may remember joined me on the WrestleMania recaps. It's awesome to have him back. And the main reason that I got him back tonight is to talk for the first time about AEW. Now, Jared and I talked briefly last week about Chris Jericho. We've got a whole episode coming up about Chris Jericho on the Broken Skull Sessions. We had some technical issues. We hope that by the time you're listening to this, maybe it's already up. If not, it'll be up next week. So, but AEW, man, I got to get your take on some things. And there may be some pushback between us. I know the last time you were on the podcast, we talked about AEW, there was some pushback. So there's probably going to be, and that's because I'm more critical about AEW maybe than most. I'm a WWE shill. I can't help it. But I can't help it. I'll admit it. Jared calls me a shill all the time. I'll admit it. But I have been watching AEW a lot closer recently for just a variety of reasons. One of the main reasons is I'm really intrigued by this Kenny Omega, Don Callis, Impact Wrestling storyline. But so far, to me, it hasn't lived up to the hype.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Like my thoughts, I thought we would see more wrestlers integrated other than the Good Brothers, which we've seen Kenny Omega over on Impact, but I thought we'd see more Impact stars on AEW. What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know. I think it's smart for Impact and AEW to work together.
100% it is,
because Impact's been doing some good stuff over the last few years, and I think it's time that people started to see them a little bit more and started to recognize them a little bit more.
Sure.
And so I think those two partnerships working together, nobody really loses in that situation. So I think that's fine. Sure. Kenny and the Good Brothers coming back together is something that people have been wanting to see since Bullet Club kind of broke up, or since the Good Brothers left and went to WWE or whatever it is. And so, that coming back is kind of cool. Honestly, I think it's just building to a Bullet Club reunion in AEW, especially because this last week you had Hangman Page after the Bucks versus Pac and Ray, which was a fantastic match.
It was really good. It was really good.
After that match, you had Hangman Page kind of backstage, and they interviewed him, asking him what's going on with the Elite kind of coming back together, and he just completely blew them off and kind of walked away. So I could see an Elite reunion that could be building to maybe like New Japan Bullet Club at some point versus the Elite if those two companies work together. So I think it's fine. I think it would be nice if more people got integrated into it outside of the Elite, outside of that little bubble. But I think Kenny Omega has kind of taken a back seat for like the first year or so of AEW. So it's kind of nice to see him at the forefront of who he is. And I think it's starting to kind of come together a lot more fluidly than it has in the past. And I think it's going to start. I think we're really going to start seeing some things kind of evolve from here, because I know Kenny and Rich Swann are supposed to have a Impact World Heavyweight Championship match in like 2 weeks, I think. No, around that time, or is it next week?
It's this weekend.
Yeah, it is this weekend.
It's this weekend. Yeah, that's right.
So I think we're going to see a lot develop this weekend on Impact.
I hope so
for that show.
I hope so, and I think it's really interesting that you bring up kind of an Elite big time reunion kind of thing. Don't you think though, with the Hangman deal, that he and Kenny would go one-on-one first before they put them back together?
Yeah, and that's probably where I could see that's where they're going to go after like this whole Kenny and Moxley thing ends. Because John Moxley, I think John Moxley's going to have to get off TV here pretty soon because of Renee having a kid and all of that. So I think they're probably going to kill John Moxley and then he's going to leave. We're going to have like a Lucha Underground story where they're going to kill off people.
Well, they tried to kill John Moxley at the pay-per-view and it did not work.
That's been the biggest botch by AEW. And you gotta feel for Eddie Kingston, man. Like he sold it and he did the best he could. And props to him for going out there and being a trooper and doing his job. I'm proud of him. I'm grateful for that. But
I would love to have been a fly on the wall for the Eddie Kingston John Moxley conversation while this is going on, because I can imagine what they were talking about.
Well, I think reports were even that Kenny was mad because
Kenny was mad.
But to kind of give them credit, they kind of played it off like, oh, Kenny got him, of like he made it off to be this big bomb. Now they all look stupid, which I don't think that was the original plan, because otherwise Eddie Kingston wouldn't have sold it like he did.
Right.
And so if that was like the end game and like both guys got up and they were fine, I think that would have been perfect. I think that would have been funny. It'd have been fine. It'd have been great, but that obviously didn't happen. And Yeah, that's a dark moment in AEW right there.
Well, one of the things I don't want to say it was a dark moment, obviously, but one of the things that I'm
Yeah.
not understanding, help me realize or help explain to me what's going on with the Young Bucks. And the reason that I say the Young Bucks and the Good Brothers and Kenny Omega, whatever, the Young Bucks have had more heel turn than the Big Show. Okay, I'm just saying. I get that there's emotions and they want to do this and they don't want to do this and they want to do the right thing and they don't, but they're getting paid off or whatever. Like, what is the deal? Why can't they just go one way or the other?
Yeah, I think at this point, after their match on last Wednesday, I think they're fully 100% healed.
I think that I think they're there now, but why? I just I don't know.
I think the original purpose was probably to build more intrigue to it, to the big turn last week turn 2 weeks ago on Moxley. I think that was like all the build up to it. But it was one of those that on paper it probably sounded good, but when it was played out, it was overplayed, and I think that kind of hurt it. So I agree with that the Bucks there's probably a better way to get to the full on heel turn when they were in the tweener mode. I think there was a better way to handle that. To me, the Young Bucks are much better as heels than they are as faces to a certain extent. I mean, when there's a crowd, it's kind of hard because everybody loves them. At the start of a match, and then by the end of the match, they normally have people against them. Which I think them and Adam Cole kind of learned how to do that. People are going to love them as soon as they come out. By the end of the match, most of the time when they're heels, they're getting booed because they're doing their job pretty well.
Well, I mean, that's the same way, with Adam Cole. That's the same way with different guys like that. So I get it. Yeah. But shout out to Jason Backwoods because he's going to call me out on this. I know he will. If he's listening, he's going to call me out because he knows how much I hate the Young Bucks. You say that the Bucks are better as heels.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree. And and maybe this is because of my lack of knowledge of the Young Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a heel, that changes your tactics in the ring and it changes your moveset.
Yeah.
The Young Bucks are known for their moves.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you take that away from them, it doesn't make them as good. It might make them more intriguing.
Right.
Okay, take that back. It doesn't make them as good because I don't think they're good anyway. But
oh man. It's breaking my heart.
It takes away what they are.
Yeah.
To me, the Bucks are high flying, doing all this crazy stuff. And you can be a tweener and do that. Mm-hmm. But from what I saw on Wednesday, some of the stuff they were doing, I feel like that takes away from who they really are.
I think so. I think in some ways they integrate it well because there's that one spot where I think it was Ray was in the corner and Matt Jackson did like 2 flips and then stopped and then raked his back instead of like hitting an actual move. That was like doing stuff like that. I think works really well for them.
Sure.
Where you could integrate like a really high spot setup and then like they could do like a move off the top rope and then land on their feet and then slap him in the face or whatever. Like something like that would be great. I do agree. I think their moveset obviously leans more towards a baby face or a face. But I'm not going to say it's not impossible for them to be good heels. I think I think what makes them such good heels is one, when they're on the mic or when they're cutting promos, they can do a really good job of being heels on the mic, I think.
Yep.
And they can
most definitely
pre-match and post-match. I think they're really good at being heels. I think in the matches where they kind of can struggle a little bit, but you got to kind of remember too, they come from the independent scene where as like what you do in between the ropes, everybody's going to cheer you, or if you're really good, like no matter what you're going to do. So might as well get all your stuff in. But then after the match is where you get your heat in a lot of ways. And so I think that works. I know you're going to hate me for saying this. To me, the Bucks are one of the greatest tag teams in the world right now. And they're one of to me, they're one of the greatest tag teams of all time. That's just to me. But I haven't been watching wrestling for as long as you have. So, the Usos are up there for me as well. But I just think that I think they do the things that they do really well, they stand on. And they push it out there and they do it like the best they can. They're not necessarily the greatest ring psychology. Like they don't have the greatest ring psychology in the world. But I think they
No
kind of make up
kidding.
for it. I think they kind of make up for it in some ways. And to me, Nick Jackson is by far the better wrestler. Whereas Matt Jackson is by far better on the mic. So like
Matt's
they
the
really
better
balance each
character.
other.
Yep, I
Yeah,
agree.
and they really balance each other.
Here's what I'll say, and then we'll move on because I can feel I can feel the anger. And I'm probably Jason will love me saying this too, because this is high praise coming from me.
Okay.
I feel like that the Young Bucks are the modern day version of the Rockers. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Like
Yeah.
if Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty debuted in 2021, this is exactly what they would be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you can definitely tell inspiration from that.
Sure.
And the way
Sure.
they dress and the way they do things. I think you can tell that. But to me, it works. And I think for me, they are one of the better tag teams in the world right now. And to be honest, the tag team divisions all across, wrestling aren't necessarily the strongest,
Right.
except for probably AEW. AEW's got a really strong tag team division.
Sure.
And so I think it's just, I don't know. I think to me, what they do really well. What they don't do well, they kind of make you forget about at some points.
Sometimes, yeah, I can get down with that. I can agree with that. So we talked about the Young Bucks, who I don't like. Somebody briefly who I do like, because I can really go down a rabbit hole on this, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. Let's talk about Sting for a minute. Sting made his long-awaited return to wrestling earlier this year with AEW, and he had a really, really good cinematic street fight with Darby Allin against Team Taz. Really enjoyed that. Here's the problem that I have with Sting on AEW. Why do they send him out there every week? Why is there a need to put Sting on television every week? If you're that concerned about ratings, and the Sting segment is the highest of any segment on the show consistently, that would sort of make sense. I can understand that, but I can guarantee you it's not. So why waste screen time and waste a legend like Sting and just trot him out there for a promo, and then he doesn't even get to speak? I know last week he spoke, but there have been plenty of times where he hasn't. So my point is, like, save Sting. Like, leading up to that Team Taz match, he should have appeared on TV like 4 times. That's it.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think they have dropped the ball on Sting in a lot of ways. I think his debut was done perfectly. I love the way that he came back. I love the way that they kind of paired him right away with Darby Allin. I think that was really smart for them to do that as well. And to put him in the ring with Team Taz, who, Sting and Taz have worked together, and so it put him kind of right back in a comfortable situation, in a comfortable spot. So I think all that was done very well. I think that was done very smart. I agreed Sting should have been on TV as much as he was.
Right.
I do think it was, honestly, I do think it was to get ratings up, because they obviously were in a rating, even though they didn't, even though neither side wanted to say they were in a war on Wednesday nights, it was a war. And, I think they were definitely trying to boost ratings. They were definitely trying to get more eyes on their product, take away eyes from NXT. So if that was the case, then I fully understand that you want to boost ratings, you want to get ratings, you want to force the other company to move to a different night, which they did, and bravo to them. But now that that's happened, Sting doesn't need to appear as much, and Sting needs to kind of be a legend that comes in for the big stuff, for the big moments, for the big pay-per-views, not for every pay-per-view. Right. And so I think they could do with Sting what they've done with Mike Tyson in a lot of ways. Bring him in for the big moments and then let him go home and tell him we'll call you and when we need you again. I think that would work really well for Sting. But maybe you got to also think maybe he wants to be there full time. Maybe he wants to be there the entire time. Maybe since he's been out for so long, he wants to get as much as he can in right now. Yeah. And if that's the case, then you got to respect his wishes, because he's Sting. What are you going to tell him? No, I mean he's Sting. So
that's true.
And I'm sure at some point he'll end up on Impact TV again to do something with them, because he was there for so long. And you got to I think it's all heading towards moments like that. So maybe they're just doing the best that they can with it, but it's not really worked every single time.
Right. I agree. Last point I want to make about AEW before we kind of wrap up is a lot of people online recently have been complaining about the number of factions in AEW. And there's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the Elite, which at this point, who knows who's in it half the time.
Right.
You've got the Nightmare Family Cody, and you've got the Nightmare Family QT Marshall, and then you've got the Dark Order. You've got Matt Hardy and his crew. I haven't even mentioned the Inner Circle or the Pinnacle at this point. I mean,
you got
the list Team Taz, like the list goes on, and a Butcher and Blade and Bunny. You know, the list goes on and on and on. What's your take on this? Do you feel like it's too much? Are you okay with it? You know, what do you think?
I think it at times is too much. But I do think that there is a place where you could have, as long as everything is working. Like, to me, the Dark Order worked, especially when I want to say Luke Harper. Brody Lee was there. When Brody Lee was in charge, which, it's very sad what happened to him. But, when Brody Lee debuted and the Dark Order was really starting to kick off, like the Dark Order went from being one of the weirdest things on AEW to one of the best things on AEW very quickly. The Inner Circle since the beginning has been the best part and the most consistent part of AEW. The ones that really like frustrate me or confuse me is the Rhodes family and like Cody Rhodes and QT Marshall. Like that's way too much going on there. Matt Hardy kind of having his own thing. I think it's pretty cool because it's an older guy taking in a lot of young talent under his wing. So I honestly think for the first few years of AEW, you're probably getting a lot of factions with experienced guys and unexperienced guys to kind of mold them and bring them in. And then a few years later, or 2 or 3 years from now, there won't be as many factions because now we've got identified stars that are kind of getting into their own now that they're away from their faction. So I kind of get the point of it. I kind of see where they're going with it. I think it works for the most part, especially with the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle and the Elite and, all those major ones. But it also makes guys like Jon Moxley feel even cooler because they're by themselves going out there doing the things they're doing. And like Hangman Page, I know he's been around the Dark Order, but he's been on his own for a long time. And so, I think it's pretty cool that you have a lot of these solo acts that are standing out, but also these factions that are standing out as well. So to me, it kind of works a little bit.
I didn't really think about it like that as far as, differentiating the solo acts versus the, the factions and, making Moxley stand out even more. I think that's really cool. And I think that's a good, maybe down the road, like you said, you've got more guys that will stand out like that. It just, especially, I think what pushed me over the edge with the faction thing, and this probably pushed everybody else over the edge too, was the Nightmare Family term, whatever. Like, to me, like that was like, okay, we have officially hit WWF Attitude Era level of factions. We need to rein it back in. So speaking, you mentioned Inner Circle and Pinnacle. I got to touch on this, man. Blood and Guts coming up in a couple of weeks. I hate, we mentioned ratings earlier. I hate that they're giving this away. To me, this is one match that you cannot give away. This would be the same as putting the Kenny Omega John Moxley death match on Dynamite to me.
Or putting War Games on NXT TV. Like, I think it's obviously a ratings pop, and it may have been set up before NXT moved, which I think it probably was set up before NXT moved to Tuesday nights. But even still, like that should be a pay-per-view dedicated to itself.
Okay. If it was set up before NXT moved, though, okay. Guess what? This is the wrestling business, and the most powerful tool in the wrestling business is the eraser. Change it.
Which
it's your company. Change it.
Which you never know. They still could change it. But at this point, I really don't see them changing it. Unless they're building to something really, really, really bigger than Blood and Guts between Chris Jericho and MJF.
Of course they are. I'm sure that that is the forefront, but you can still like stretch this thing out, man.
You could,
Like You could have easily, nobody would have criticized at all if it was the promo last week, right?
Yeah.
That Jericho announced. Okay. The promo last week, by the way, Jericho knocked that promo out of the park, down the street, and into the next county. I mean,
called him Pineapple. That
he
was fantastic.
killed that promo.
Yeah.
My jerk off friend. I love it.
Yeah, I love it.
So anyway, no one would have been mad if he would have in that promo said May 30th, Double or Nothing, Blood and Guts.
Yeah.
Nobody would have been mad at that
because
it makes sense. That's what frustrates me about AEW. I mean, again, I'm not in the ratings room or the war room or whatever.
Right.
So I don't understand that side of it. But to me, as a wrestling fan and kind of knowing what I know, they talk, one of the biggest critiques that Bruce Pritchard has about WCW back in the day is that they put Goldberg and Hogan on Nitro when Goldberg finally won the title. Make people pay for that, because guess what? They will.
Right, absolutely. I mean, if Chris Jericho is on the cover of anything, wrestling fans are going to buy it.
Bingo. That's it.
And so the only thing I can think of that the reason why they're doing this on TV and not putting on Double or Nothing is if they have a really big opponent lined up for Chris Jericho at Double or Nothing. Maybe they have a New Japan. Maybe Naito is coming over from New Japan. Maybe Tanahashi or somebody like that is coming over from New Japan that wants to work with Chris Jericho at Double or Nothing. That's the only way I could see. That's the only reason why I could see them putting this on TV. But still, I wouldn't put it on TV. You can make it a pay-per-view in between now and Double or Nothing.
Right.
Or you can make it like its own special, like a 1-hour special. On Bleacher Report, you could do Blood and Guts, and it's just this match, this match that goes on for an hour. But with all that being said, I'm still looking forward to it, and I don't have to pay money to watch it now, so that's a win for me, a plus for me.
Listen, that's where I'm at, because I don't want to pay any money for anything AEW, especially after the deathmatch fiasco.
Yeah,
I didn't pay for that. I got to watch it for free, of course, but I'm not paying for anything, so that's good because now I'm going to get to watch it.
Yeah, the deathmatch up until the end for me, the deathmatch was a lot of fun to watch.
Listen, I am not criticizing the match whatsoever. It was good. It was real. I mean, I can't even say I was on the edge of my seat because I was standing the whole time.
Yeah.
So I was in it until the end.
Yeah, the end kind of, and that's the bad part, is because the only thing people remember about the end of the pay-per-view is the end of the pay-per-view. They remember how it starts and they remember how it ends, and that's kind of the hard part for AEW. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this match. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think, I think Chris Jericho is, to me, and I know you're gonna. This is another area where we're going to disagree, but I think you're fine with me saying this as well. To me, Chris Jericho is the greatest of all time. Maybe not. He's the greatest overall.
He is 110%. My wife would criticize me. You see, my math is coming out again. He is 110% in the conversation. I will give you that.
Yeah.
I cannot put him over Shawn Michaels.
Right.
But the guy is absolutely in the top 5 conversation.
And like the difference is for me and you is like you grew up on Shawn Michaels.
Yep.
I grew up on Chris Jericho. I started watching when Chris Jericho started wearing the suits and talking slowly, and like he brought on that whole heel persona, and like I've gone through everything with him, and so like
and in that feud, in the talking slow and wearing suits, who is he feuding with?
Shawn Michaels, absolutely.
Shawn Michaels,
absolutely. And so I think what he has done though since that point, I think he is definitely in the conversation. Well, I mean, he's definitely top 5, if not, the number 1 spot. And, the number 1 spot for me kind of changes after going back and watching certain matches. I'm like, oh no, Shawn Michaels is the greatest of all. No, Ric Flair is the greatest of all. No, Chris Jericho. So like it kind of changes throughout watching it, but
sure it does. I totally get that. And Jared and I are talking on the Chris Jericho episode that may be released or yet to be released, talking about how he literally makes something out of nothing in WCW. Because you talk about 2008 and how he was doing great things, and on the Jericho interview with Stone Cold, spoiler alert, he talks about how that's when he became Chris Jericho.
Yeah,
he did not become Chris Jericho until that feud, that time. But look at the stuff he did in WCW. he got this 1004 holds promo over, which had no business getting over.
Right.
He created this whole hoopla with Goldberg that never got paid off, but everybody wanted to see it.
Yeah.
So I will tell you this. I don't think Jericho is number one overall, the best ever. Is absolutely on the Mount Rushmore professional wrestling.
Absolutely.
Hands down, no doubt.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, he's not the greatest in the ring. He's not, you know, the greatest, you know, performer necessarily between the ropes, but what he does outside of the ring, and he can hold his own in the ring, but what he does outside the ring is what makes him who he is. And I think that's like, if you look at Shawn Michaels was amazing in the ring, but he was also amazing outside the ring.
Yep.
Ric Flair was good, like for his time was good in the ring, but was top notch outside the ring. Like Flair is the pinnacle. You have The Rock. The Rock was not like The Rock wasn't necessarily that great of a wrestler, but he was like charismatic and he was a fantastic talker. Stone Cold, going back and watching some of Stone Cold's matches, he wasn't necessarily the best in the ring, but he understood what he was doing and he knew what he was doing. And so, like, I think when you're saying the greatest of all time, we're not talking necessarily about in between the ropes. We're talking about the greatest of all time overall. Everything, character, how you're able to adapt with the time. Like, I know Ric Flair is wrestling probably up until they're probably going to carry him out in a casket and from a ring, which, you know, is whatever. But to me, I think Chris Jericho is definitely top three, but for me, probably top, like the number one spot because of all of that.
I will say this confidently, and I don't think you'll argue with me here. Right now in 2021, Chris Jericho's number one.
Oh, absolutely.
Nobody touches him.
Absolutely.
Nobody touches that guy.
I think the only close person, and it's not even really that close to me, like Roman Reigns is doing some of the best stuff he's ever done, and I think he's a two that's like a mile away though. Like there's a big gap between 1 and 2, and so I think what Chris Jericho is able to do at his age right now, and being the guy that is literally like he put his career on the line by joining AEW. And it has paid. I mean, I think it's paid off. I think AEW, they haven't got everything perfect, but I think right now they are a success for the first few years. And you know, I don't think they're ever going to be as big as WWE. There's nobody going to be ever as big as WWE.
Sure,
but I think they are going to put the fire to Vince's butt for a little while. And I think that's to me that's the best thing for wrestling is when everybody's backed into a corner, or when everybody has Vince backed into a corner. That's when WWE starts to do some of their best work. Yep. And so I think we're going to start seeing some of that very soon.
And the reason Vince would get backed up against the wall is because of Chris Jericho.
Absolutely.
There is not another person, I don't think, as far as free agent wrestlers that could have besides CM Punk.
Yeah.
Besides CM Punk, that could have joined AEW at the beginning and made the impact that Chris Jericho did.
And I'm a huge CM Punk fan. CM Punk is probably my favorite wrestler of all time. Right. He's not the greatest, but he's my favorite wrestler of all time. I don't think CM Punk could have done what Chris Jericho has done for AEW.
Nope. I agree with that.
Punk would have brought something different to the table, and I think it would have worked for AEW, but I don't think it would have been what it is now without Chris Jericho. And I think that's a big part of it. I think pretty soon, if things continue like they are, we're going to start seeing some guys leaving WWE, not asking for the release or getting released, but leaving WWE for AEW. And if that starts happening, then I think that's where things that's when we're really going to start seeing what both companies are made of, is when that starts to happen.
When the war really starts.
Yep.
Well, I'm afraid that I've put AEW over too much. So that being said, it's time to put a bow on this week's edition.
I did my job.
It is time to put a bow on this week's edition of the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. Make sure you follow us all over social media. We are at PBW Podcast. Buy a t-shirt at prowrestlingtees.com/PBW Podcast. Mr. Andy has designed a couple of those t-shirts that are up there, and I'm sure we'll design a few more. So the more you buy, the more we can put up. So support the show in that way. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on video, please make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube. That way you get an alert every time we get a new video up. We drop episodes on Mondays and Wednesdays, but guys, we'll go live whenever you want. If you got questions, send them to us. We'll answer them. We are here for you. This is for the fans, by the fans. And Andy is a big fan of the podcast. Andy's a big fan of wrestling. That's why we got him on here. Andy has his own show, the Shandy Show, that is coming out in a few weeks. Make sure you tell everybody one more time, Andy, where you can find that show and kind of what you're going to cover.
Yeah, so you can find us on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find the Shandy Show. We're going to be starting back up probably in the middle of May, kind of covering some things there. We're going to be talking about Marvel, DC, Star Wars, wrestling. We're going to be covering a lot of fun, different stuff. Kind of anything I want to talk about, which is a lot of fun when you kind of have your own show. You can kind of talk about whatever you want to talk about. If I want to talk about Reds baseball, I'll talk about Reds baseball. We'll see if that happens.
Listen, I wouldn't get too excited about Reds baseball. I know that they started off hot, but come on now.
Yeah, they're ranked right now. I think they're ranked right now like fourth best in baseball. So by the All-Star break, they'll probably be like 20th or something.
That's very true.
This is what normally happens. But yeah, you can find us basically anywhere you find the Pipe Bomb Wrestling podcast. You can find us there as well.
That's right, because we are both supported by Anchor. Thank you very much, Anchor, for throwing your support to all of us and for all you do. We appreciate that. All right. That is our show for this week. Andy, thanks so much, man, for hopping on. I appreciate you hanging out.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Pipe Bomb Wrestling Podcast. I'm Chris Belcher. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We'll catch you guys down the road.